Today, I am really honored and excited to be sitting here with Dr. Nona Djavid, and I am really inspired by your approach to leadership, to transformation, and really the nuance that you bring to the table when it comes to nervous system and manifestation and all of the things that we love here on the feminine frequency. So, a warm welcome to you, Dr. Nona Javid.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, amazing. Well, you have been on quite the trajectory of both personal and professional growth. And I would love to start by hearing more about your story, specifically as it relates to high achievement or operating more in the hyper masculine realms when it comes to achieving success.
Yes, exactly that. The hyper masculine is what I did for a long time. So I grew up in an environment where my family really valued achievement. So it was like the A plus, the academics, the doing, a lot of the doing. I oftentimes got praised for doing things and, being the best at things. And so I always thought that was just kind of who I was, and I'm this high achieving individual. And it really worked out for me for a while, which is, I think, hard when you have a pattern that is working out, even though it's toxic, you don't recognize it. So in that pattern, I went to Berkeley. I studied neurology. I got my doctorate degree. I moved to a new town, opened a business, built out a business. I also checked off personally a lot of boxes that I felt like, the culture or the society or the consciousness of the world wanted me to check off, all the things you're supposed to do, right? So I got married, had children, checked off all of those boxes. Before I was in my mid 20s, I built a seven-figure business. And so
Wow.
I was the definition, the textbook definition of the go-getter. And I remember shortly after I was completely burnt out from being in that hyper masculine. And I think there were two patterns that existed at the time. One was making things happen from a masculine energy. And the second was that I was also scared. There was a lot of fear and scarcity of not making things happen, which then again drove me at the hyper masculine push of making the life happen and making the business happen and making the education happen. And so the combination of those two things ultimately led to me being completely burnt out in the process. I mean, I'd built this life, but at the same time, it looked really successful from the outside, except internally, I was isolated. My marriage wasn't working from a personal perspective. In my business, I had 13 employees and I was running this really great company, except I didn't feel connected to it. I wasn't fulfilled. I'd also created this whole system where it requiring me to put in so much work and energy and mental space into it. I just didn't have the return at that time. So that was the pattern back then. And thankfully, I had the burnout early on. And I say thankfully because it really was the opening to go, okay, well, I can keep setting goals, quote unquote, and hit the next thing and, check the next box, except I'm going to end up in, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good.
Mm.
Yeah, right. I more of the same wasn't going to do it. And I remember thinking, and I had a God moment in a closet actually, where I walked into the closet, I shut down the door, I shut down the lights, and I just sat there and I started sobbing. And I realized in that moment that the path that I'd taken, I mean, it was valuable what I had created, but the path I'd taken and the way that I had approached it was just not going to be worth really living if I was going to continue that. And walked out of that closet and made a decision to do things differently. So this is where I started to kind of get into all the energetics of things. And now looking back, I see my degree in neurology came in handy. I have a doctorate in chiropractic. The body heals itself. So all of these different components of my life and what I'd experienced, even being in the hyper masculine, helped me create, sort of a new game plan, because contrast teaches you, right? The things that you don't want, you learn what do you want next. And so I started to embody and learn and dove into more of the universal truths and into the feminine energy and into manifestation from a neurological perspective too. And so that really gave me a whole different way of thinking and living and, and dreaming. And so that was the beginning of everything.
Wow. For people who are not watching the video right now, I have like a huge smile on my face and I'm just like nodding along. Yes, 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 because this journey that you've been on is so familiar. This creating the life and success that looks good on the outside, the accolades, the financial success, checking off all the boxes, and yet internally having such a different experience, lived experience, and then having that God moment, having that spiritual awakening of like, this way is not serving me. It's not sustainable. It's not working for me. And starting to open the perspective, oh, there might be another way. And I feel like as a culture and as society, we are at this turning point and we have been in this awakening of consciousness during this time of the age of Aquarius or the feminine rising, whatever you want to call it. And it's why women are listening to this podcast right now. It's why we're having this conversation because there is a new way that is being paved. And that's actually what I talk about in my book, The Feminine Way, is that we get to take a different approach where we integrate the masculine, which is what you just shared, like the things that you learned in neurology and in chiropractic school, like those are important. And the feminine of the energetics and really working with the universe and the laws of the universe and with our bodies, not just our minds, and bringing those two, bridging those two together. And I think, especially as women, we are here to lead the way of this new path. And so I really admire and appreciate your background, with all of your doctorate degrees and integrating the more metaphysical aspects of life and of the wisdom that we can access from that place. So, thank you for sharing your story. And one of the things that I know for high achieving women and growth oriented women is that we do want more. We want success. We don't just want to float around all day and to, always be in our feminine. It sounds nice, but there's a part of us, and it is our soul that wants to grow, that wants to reach our full potential. And so I think there can be a misunderstanding when we start to explore these concepts of masculine feminine dynamics of like, oh, you can't have success if you're following your passions or if you're living in flow or if you're doing it this different way. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about this piece of working with your nervous system to manifest success and how that has been maybe a missing piece of how we used to go about trying to be successful financially and in all the other areas of our life.
Yeah, so I want to address, if you don't mind, what you just said about the mask, because it's such a juicy topic. And then I'll get into the nervous system stuff too, because this is something that I have personally experienced, right? Being in the hyper masculine. And I also grew up with a mom who was, I would say, if I were to pick the spectrum of feminine, more so in the feminine, but it didn't show up in the divine feminine way that
The wounded feminine or disempowered feminine. Yeah.
powered, it was chaotic, it was emotional. So there was definitely a part of me that was like, I definitely don't want to be like that. So I associated feminine with chaotic and emotional and, sure in the flow, but never getting anything productive done. And perhaps some toxicity, right? Like bonding by disempowered beliefs or bonding by gossip. Like there was a lot of that going on. So moving in this direction gave me so much more power because I had the structure, but I had also moved away from parts of me that were really, really useful in both building a business and in a relationship. So when I always think of the feminine and masculine as these two energies that, simply put, those are the two energies that create life together. Like the feminine energy cannot create life without the masculine energy. And this is not really about gender or anything like that. This is just these two energies, by the way, that we all have access to. Like I have access to my feminine energy, I have access to my masculine energy. And what I realized in this process is in my business, I can leverage the masculine energy in me to create the container for the feminine part of me to be creative and to be in the flow and to kind of get into the creativity and the nurturing process and all the things that the feminine is really powerful at. And the masculine part of me can hold the container for it. And the combination of those two things is what really gives birth to literally create life, right? The combination of those two and the integration of them in a healthy way, then it gives birth to a project, a manifestation of a dream house or a dream partner or a business to bring money in, whatever it is that you want to do. It's like, how can I bring the two energies together and integrate them in such a way that is going to create life, create a project, build a website out, build a funnel out, becoming aware of how much access we have to both and then where we are on the spectrum. Too much of one, too much of the other, and how do we integrate it well that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. And we'll just pause there before we get into this piece around the nervous system because when I work with women, I work with women who some of them have a hard time accessing their feminine energy for similar reasons to what you just shared. It's been suppressed, there's misunderstandings around it, there's toxicity that they don't like, that they relate to being feminine attributes and weakness. Like it is seen in our culture, a lot of the feminine traits, especially the wounded feminine traits, but a lot of the feminine traits are not as valued by Western culture, right? We don't value intuition. We don't value emotions. We don't value sensuality as a sacred energy, right? And then I have other clients who have a lot of wounding around masculine energy and they've got creative energy and they feel inspired and passionate. But when it comes to creating that structure and stepping into their leadership in that way and taking action, there's a lot of sometimes it's inner narrative around self-doubt or not trusting themselves or being afraid that they're going to get burnt out again if they have been burnt out in the past. So this work is a lot deeper than just understanding, oh, this is what masculine energy looks like, this is what feminine energy looks like. These are deep layers of conditioning and layers of both personal from how you experienced your parents and what you learned in school and what we learned from society, and then also just in the world at large what we're influenced by. And so yeah, I think there's so much to unpack and so many layers. I'm really appreciating just learning more about your journey and how you've cultivated more of a healthy dance or a healthy balance with these two energies inside of you.
Absolutely. And I think this is where the nervous system is actually key, right? Because all of the things that we are neurotagged by when we are a child, right? Like when I grew up and watched my mom be chaotic and anxious and all the different emotions that she was experiencing, while there is a conversation about money, or while there is a conversation about work, or while there's a relationship dynamic happening between my mom and my dad, well, as a child, below the age of 7, I'm getting neuro tagged and anchored in my nervous system with how these things are correlated with all these different emotions, right? With this toxic environment, or with anxiety, or stressed out, or not enoughness, or overwhelmed, whatever that dynamic was experiencing gets passed on to me the energetic field that existed at the time. So some people think, oh, my parents never fought in front of me, or I never experienced it. It's like, no, listen, there is the energy. Your body, your field will pick up on the energetic field of other people that you are in unison with. So that being your caretakers, your grandparents, your close family and friends. So if I'm being neuro tagged with all of these things at a young age, and so later in life, we listen to the podcast and we learn different things. We go, okay, I want to manifest this next level thing. And then we learn, all right, you do a vision board and you do affirmations and things like that. Then, all right, well, every time you say that affirmation around money or relationship or the thing that you want to pull into your life or the way that you want to live, right? Every time you say those things, even though you are saying them, even though you're looking at the pictures or you're talking about them as if they're already here, your nervous system goes, oh, wait a second, stressed out, anxiety, and overwhelm because those are the things that you experienced when you were a child together with all the things that were happening in your household. So, very basic concept, right? Pavlov's dog. There was, the dog would come in. There is every time there was a cookie, there was a ring bell. Cookie, ring bell, cookie, ring bell, cookie, ring bell, and over and over again. And obviously, that creates saliva, physiologically creates saliva in the dog. Now, next thing you know, those two things are tagged together and no cookie, just the ring bell, saliva. So, literally, the nervous system and the chemistry that is taking place inside of the body is responding to something that there might be no threat, no, your survival doesn't need to kick in. You're not in danger, none of those things. You're just saying, I am a money magnet, or you are saying the affirmation, or you're saying that you want to pull in a relation, or you're in a safe, healthy relationship, even. And all of a sudden, all of those different pieces of self sabotage are popping up only because you have been anchored with those things and tagged with those things previously. So I found that there are two ways to kind of get around this from a nervous system perspective. One way that's we've done traditionally is to go to therapy and sort of take out the weeds, which I think is really powerful and really important. But I also would say that we've probably given too much power to that and not enough power to where we are headed. Because if I'm spending all of my time analyzing and breaking down and integrating what has been happening, then I'm spending a lot of energy on what is not working. So there's some of that that's really, really valuable. And then the other approach is to say, okay, if from a nervous system perspective, from a neurological, psychological perspective, and this is something I always say, you only experience what you have experienced in the past. So listen, if I have only experienced, around a certain topic, money, relationships, health, body, whatever, if I've only experienced anxiety, overwhelm, and not enoughness directly or indirectly, then I'm likely to continue to have that in the future. So if that is the truth of the nervous system, if that's, and when we say manifestation, it's literally that. If you have experienced a toxic relationship and you've seen your parents do it, you're going to quote unquote manifest the next relationship that's going to be toxic. And because that is in your energetic field also. So how do we change that then? Right? If this is what I grew up with and these are the patterns I have picked up, you're telling me that I'm going to experience what I have experienced, then how do we change that? Well, here's the beautiful part about the nervous system is that you could rewire. And one of the ways you can rewire is you go, well, what do I want to experience? And I think as women, we oftentimes forget and we oftentimes have lost touch or there's this level of disconnect with the things that we actually desire. So this was my process was like, what do I want to experience in my relationship? This is when, if you dig deep, and this is, like you said, this is not a surface level feminine, masculine. These are the traits and just go practice them. But if you dig deep, you go, wait a second, sensuality, this is part of who I am. Wait a second, self pleasure, this is part of who I am. Wait a second, I want really juicy, amazing sex with my partner. in terms of life, what do I want to experience? I go, okay, well, I do want financial freedom. That is the right of the feminine to have financial freedom because that's literally what we want to do. We want to be free, we want to be creative, and we want to impact the world in completely different ways than the masculine. Well, okay, those are the things I want to do. I want to create impact. I want to build companies. But I don't want to burn out. And I definitely don't want to work as hard or as much as I did before. I want to have time with my children. I want to travel the world and I want to be this sort of wild adventure traveler that I want to live between Europe and Southern California. So I started to just kind of jot down the ways that I wanted to impact the world, the ways that I wanted my companies to be. And this is where this concept of an unreasonable vision came to life for me. So I was like, all right, these are things I want to experience. These are things I have experienced. I can sit with what I have experienced, learn from them, pull out some of the weeds, but let's also focus on what I want to experience. And this has been kind of overclaimed in in spiritual circles, especially when it comes down to science. But the same areas of your brain will light up when you think about doing something as if you are actually doing those things. I mean, Formula One drivers, they're sitting there and envisioning and bringing, kind of looking at every turn that they are taking. Majority of athletes are doing vision work because of this particular fact, right? If I'm on a spin cycle, if I'm doing spin and I'm biking, the certain areas of my brain will light up as if I'm actually sitting there in meditation thinking about biking or being on that spin bike, right? So
Mm,
if I can give that life that I just described, which is what I did when I got out of the closet, but give that life to my nervous system and then neuro tag it with all the emotions that that life would bring, the sexiness of it, the freedom, the spaciousness of it, the creativity, the impact, the gratitude, the joy, the love, all the things that it brings. Now I'm creating intentionally as an adult those neuro tags that go together. So, in a sense, I'm also putting those emotions into my neurofield, into my energetic field. And next thing you know, I have opportunities that are allowing me to do that. And a lot of this work has led me to live the life that I just kind of described, especially coming from that hyper masculine work all the time and now getting everything to be in a place where, working 1 week every month, homeschooling my kids, world schooling them, traveling with them every chance I get. I live between Southern California and Italy. Back then, this idea and this vision was completely crazy. It was completely crazy because I was approaching it from the place that I was hyper masculine and also from a place of fear, completely neurotagged with all these, you know, emotions of anxiety and not enough and scarcity and all of that.
mm. Yeah, so powerful. This is actually the first time I've heard of this term neurotagging, and it makes so much sense. And so, really, it's a rewiring, a repatterning of, okay, can I, the old way of seeing it or experiencing love might have been like, oh, love means pain or love means abandonment if that's your childhood story. And now, neuro tagging and rewiring that love means safety or love means joy or love means intimacy or whatever, finding the feeling that you want to feel. And so I'm hearing that visualization, first getting clear on what it is that you want to create in the future, and then visualizing and feeling the desired experience that you want to have helps to create that neuro field or to shift the energy that we relate to those experiences. Is that correct?
Yes. So every time, say, you observed the relationship dynamic in your childhood, there was anxiety attached to it. And now, as an adult, say, when I got divorced, it's like I can't I can't as get in another dynamic, right? I can't get in another relationship and create a new neuro tag with this new person, right? But what I can do is I can create it in my neurochemistry. I can create it in my nervous system. This is all of what manifestation is, right? Like everything from Neville Goddard, law of attraction, all of these things are really speaking to this very physiological effect of Pavlov's dog. Except the challenge here is if I'm spending so much time here in anxiety, and those are the patterns that I'm addicted to, those are emotional patterns I'm addicted to, then, how do I get to the other side? Well, the only way to get to the other side outside of the 3D world, throwing something at you that sort of jolts your nervous system, because there are only two ways to break a pattern. One is a major event happens in your life, and the second is repetition, right? Repetition of a new pattern. So if I can create the new pattern, define what the new pattern is, and then create it and then live and embody that, then what I'm neurologically doing is creating a new tag that's going to override the old tag. And then now I'm in a relationship. And of course, then this is a lifetime of work. Now, in a new relationship, I can recognize how I'm showing up with the patterns or the addictions in the past, and I can continue to reframe them.
Amazing. Okay, so you pointed out something really important there, which is repetition. And, I think a lot of women who are listening are like, okay, I've heard of visualization. I know that it's important. I know that it's important to feel the desired feelings, right? But this piece of repetition, if we could break this down even as like a practice or something that women could, after they listen to this podcast, could get started with, what might that look like to have a visualization practice? Is it daily? Is there a certain amount of time? Like, what did it look like for you?
I always say, people ask me, like, what are your habits, or how do you do this? Or, what's the best way? What's the hack to get there? And I think this is what I've realized over the years, that the thing that you are going to do consistently is the best way. So
Yep.
it figure out, so the science is very solid here. So what you'll need to do is give yourself a version of a mind movie, or a version of a scene, a few second of a scene, as if the life that you want on the other side is already here. So that's one thing you've got to figure out how to do. And now that could be written, it could be audio, it could be a vision board, it could be something like that. And then the key here is the emotion, because neurotags are the emotions you picked up with anxiety. You got to create a new emotion to override that one. So then make sure that you have emotion. All right, well, how do we do this? You can write out a script. What I teach in my coaching containers is create a vision for your unreasonable life. So you're writing it out as if that is already here, right? The wish fulfilled, like Neville Goddard says. And if the wish is here and I wrote it down, and then I give suggestions. I go, "Can you read this and feel the emotions?" And some people, because they are auditory, they can read it out loud, and it will create an emotion. Some people will go, "I have to listen to it." Some people will go, "I have to look at a vision board that elicits this." There's a sense of smell that if you read it, it's a version of neurotagging also. If I smell lavender every time I read my life vision, then if I'm driving and I can smell lavender on my wrist, then okay, it brings back all of those emotions again. So, what is your way that is going to be easy enough to repeat on daily basis? So it might be just like a 2-minute practice, or it might be an hour practice. Like, what's easy for you to stay consistent at? Because I would rather somebody say, I'm going to do a minute of visualizing a scene in the future where I am in this beautiful marriage and my business is doing this way, or my career is this way, whatever we're manifesting. 2 minutes. I would rather you do that for 2 minutes every day than say, oh no, I'm going to go all out, half an hour a day, morning, nighttime, and then drop off, or be inconsistent. So figure out what is the way for you that you get to repeat. My non-negotiable is always reading through my vision and doing some version of priming where I visualize myself in 3 future scenarios or mind movies. Make sure that my brain is primed to perceive those opportunities and my energetic field to pull into those opportunities for me.
Yeah, I love all of those suggestions. And I also share with my clients, I think especially as overachievers, we tend to overcommit or we're like, oh, I'm going to do all of the things. And then we just fall short because it's like, oh, we set the bar really freaking high and we're trying to hold so many things at once. And then we feel like we're not doing enough or like we're just constantly behind, and that doesn't help. So I love that suggestion of picking a more of a bite-sized practice that you can actually do, especially when it comes to repetition and a daily thing. And I love what you shared about making it your own and that we're all different in the ways that this lands for us. And for my clients and for myself, something that really helps me to tap into emotion is dancing and movement. So for me, if I can like read the vision and then I can put on a song that maybe elicits the emotion that I want to feel, and then I can dance with the vision and actually shift my state through movement and music and breath and sound and, through the embodiment practice, that is so potent. Right. And sometimes we can even be with those, ooh, like the fear of what if that doesn't happen or the doubt or whatever. And we can move that through the body as a powerful way to move through the blocks and then to come into the state and the frequency that we actually want to be in. So yeah, I wanted to add that in there because I feel like, you said there's different access points for different people. And even if it's just one or two songs a day where women are tapping into their desired feeling, I feel like that could be so potent to incorporate.
Absolutely. And dance and movement is the way to go from the left side of the brain where you think, where you're zoomed in and you are saying, things are not going to work out or I'm stressed out or whatever the case is, to bring you to the other side. I always tell my students that you can't logically talk yourself out of or into a new vision or into a new life. You'll have to feel through it. And the way to feel through it is through the body.
Hmm. Yeah, and the feeling is energy. Like energy is, emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. So it's like we have to get into the body, into the senses in order to feel, which is again where the feminine aspect comes in and not just staying in the logic of it and the mind, analyzing and projecting the future from the mind. So I love this piece around tapping into the emotion and into the sensation. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So, one final piece that I wanted to dive into today is about embodying your next level identity for unlocking freedom and prosperity. And I think sometimes we can get stuck in autopilot or we can get really attached to our current identity from like a really subconscious, unknowing place where we don't want to let go of our identity. Or we think we want to change and we want to grow, but then we kind of get stuck in the current version of ourselves. So I would love to hear any tips and yeah, any philosophies that you have on how can we actually embody our next level identity to call in more success and more freedom?
Absolutely. So, to build some foundation, we pick up hyper identities as a way to protect us, right? Like, I am shy, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, I'm funny, I'm smart, like all of these things that we pick up along the way, especially the ones that we really cling on to, they're a form of protection, right? Something happened in childhood, and now I had to become funny, or I had to become really smart, or I had to become a certain way. And kind of what we talked about at the beginning, or what I said about how a toxic pattern will work, which is hard to kind of let go of. Because if I let go of this part of my identity that has been protecting me and that's been making me money, that's been making me be perceived a certain way, then there is an ego death, or there is a death of a part of my identity or an old version that needs to happen for a new part to arrive. And for me, there was that death that I've gone through many, many times as well to have a new version of myself, whether it's in my relationship or in my business, and it shows up in different ways. I just want to remind you, anyone who's listening, that identity is fluid, meaning when every single one of us was born, there's very little parts of how we show up in terms of genetics that is linked to identity. Majority of how we show up is we have no fear of anything. There's no anxiety. There's no fear of not enoughness or any of those things. If you read, I used to have a practice of pediatric and prenatals, and in the textbooks of prenatal textbooks, they will tell you that we are born with only two fears: fear of loud noises and fear of falling. And I would actually argue against that because the baby is not afraid of those things. The baby just kind of responds and they're a reflex, right? If you go to put them down and you are too abrupt, then they respond and they have a reflex. It's not an actual fear in the way that you and I experience it as adults. So, if we don't have any fear and we are born with unlimited potential and we don't really have much of an identity, then every piece of identity we've picked up has been along the way with direct and indirect experiences. And to some degree, they work for us until they don't. So, if you want to go to the next level of life and manifest that next level of juiciness for yourself, you've got to go, there is a part of my identity that's actually holding me back to that next level. And there's a death that needs to happen in this part. So as I dove into this future identity work, I came across so much research, Amy, and it's so fun to actually see science prove the fact that if you could just get in touch with your future identity, you could embody her a bit more, then soon enough you'll become her. You'll collapse the time between where you are and where she is, and it will happen in such a short period of time. So I want to share one piece of the research just really quick, just because I think it's really fun. They took these middle school students who are in low income areas. These kids have no desire to go to college. Most of them do not even finish high school, right? This was a semi large study, I would say. And they took all of these middle school students, they split them into two groups. They had the control group, which school as usual, nothing different. And they took the second group of these students. They didn't tutor them. They didn't give them more academics. They didn't, have them study anything differently. They just school as usual, except one element, Amy, one element. And in this element was, and I thought this was fascinating, they showed them what a college student would look and feel like and what they do in a day in a life. They just showed them what it would be like to be a college student. And they weren't like making it all magical. They were saying this is what they do. They go to this class and then they walk over to this class. And so they gave them an identity of a future. And by the way, these kids didn't even have the desire to go to college. So and they did this twice a week. Don't quote me on this if you look up the study, but I think it was like 10 minutes. I remember reading it and being like, this is ridiculous. It's two times a week, like just a handful of minutes, right? And the results were just outstanding. The group that got in touch with the future identity not only turned in more of their homework, but they became academically stronger. They tested better on scores. They were more likely to go to college compared to the control group. Right? And there's tons of studies around this, except how do we put this into place, right? How do we integrate this study and make it into our lives? All right. Well, what if you sat down and you determined, and I think this is why I'm such a big fan of drawing that unreasonable vision and really getting clear on what that is first, because if you don't know what that is, you're going to have a hard time figuring out who is the version of you that's living that life. You're going to have a hard time. I have a 4-step framework. The first step is the unreasonable vision. The second step is expanding your identity. you're going to have a hard time defining what is that expanded version of your identity, right? And some people will listen to this and go, okay, but I'm not confident, or but I'm not that way. And that is just not the truth. That is your left brain zooming in and keeping you safe, because if you feel that way, then you don't have to step outside of your comfort zone. You don't have to go on social media. You don't have to be seen. You don't have to get hurt. So I want to remind everybody that you're not confident, and you're not confident. You are what you choose to be. I mean, there are days where I wake up confident. I think you can say the same, Amy. There are days I don't wake up confident. So which one am I? I'm just the one that has more practice in, whether it's confidence or lack of confidence. So when you design and you intentionally expand your identity, all right, now we get to practice this, through embodiment on day-to-day basis. But this identity I have just defined in this particular step is a match for the life that I've decided I'm going to be living.
Mm. Yeah, I love that a little bit reverse engineering, like starting with, okay, what is the life that I want to live? And then this next piece feels to me around like, who do I need to become, or what are the qualities of a woman who is living that type of life? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And a good example of this is when I decided I was no longer going to work full time, burn myself out. One of my first visions was that I was going to create multiple companies and generate multiple seven figures, but I was only going to work 20 hours a week. That was the vision, but my identity was not there. My identity had the patterns of I have to work really hard, and I have to sacrifice, and I have to struggle. So the parts of me that had to die in that process were the parts of me that had made me successful to that point. So determining who you need to become, what are the traits you need to express more of, what are the traits you need to express less of, really pen to paper is a really key component to this.
So fascinating. I'm super inspired, and I'm in a kind of a space right now where I have really just been through a huge initiation in my life, and I feel like there are parts of me that had to like die and that have been going through this ego death. So I feel like this is a really, really big time right now. As we're recording this, we just finished eclipse season in September, and there was a lot that shifted for me. And so being in this space, I feel like it's such a good time right now to be tuning into that future vision and also into this identity work of the next level version of myself. And I like to share with my clients that that next level version of yourself lives inside of you. She's not out there. She's not like you need to become someone else or something else. And like you said, it is about this choosing, like choosing to become her and pointing your attention and your awareness and your energy to the direction of who you want to become and where you're going more often than getting stuck in the narrative and the story of who you've been up until now. And I really do believe that this type of work, we can do some of it on our own, but I do feel like working with mentors and also being in the spaces with other growth oriented people and almost like absorbing through osmosis these new identities. Like when you surround yourself by people who are more successful than you, and when I define success, it might not be, oh, because they're making more money, but are they making more money, and are they doing it in a way where they're not burnt out? Ooh, I want to be around those women. Or I want to be around women who are in their, sensual confidence and where they're just so embodied. Okay, great. Let's start surrounding ourselves with those types of women. Right. So I feel like our environment can also help us to expand our identities as we're doing this work.
Absolutely. And you brought such a good point that the next version of you is already inside of you. Something I like to remind everyone is that this is not fake it till you make it situation. This is actually expressing more of who you are, and what's involved is unlearning the things that are actually not you. This process will take you to more of who you are here to be and just removing the things that are holding you back from that. I just wanted to say that definitely don't want to be the sound that says you've got to be somebody else and something else. I want to be the sound, I want to be very clear. This is a process in which you become a version of you that you are designed to be, and that's what's real. What you're showing up in your limitation, that's what's fake.
Yeah. I'm so glad we ended on that. That just, yeah, resonates so deeply. And I think that's what we're doing as spiritual beings is being more fully expressed as the version of like our soul and our spirit that is actually connected to higher consciousness and to universal intelligence. It's like that's who we really, really are underneath all of the conditioning. So I love that you brought that in here and that you highlighted that. Yeah, well, this has been so powerful. I'm learning a lot and I've really enjoyed learning from you and being with you today. And for our listeners who want to get to know you more, who want to work with you and learn from you further, where is the best place for them to find you?
Would love a personal connect. I always love to personally connect with anyone who is listening to this. Mention Amy's name, show up Instagram page, send me a message. I mentioned the framework, the four-step framework of quantum leaping or, getting your life sort of becoming the next version of you. Two of the steps we talked about today, the unreasonable vision, the expanding identity. I have a whole training on this. So if this conversation was juicy and you message me on Instagram and say, "Hey, I listened to you on Amy's podcast," and tell me what you loved about it, and I will send you that full training for free. Absolutely.
Amazing. And we're going to include your Instagram in the link in the show notes. Do you want to just say what your handle is so people can go directly there?
Yes, it's just my first name and my last name. So it's Nona, Nona, my last name, which is kind of spelled funky, but it's D as in David, Javid.
Beautiful. We're going to link that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for your time and for your wisdom and for being with us here today on the Feminine Frequency.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Amy.